Today, I am extremely excited to be joined by Patrick Bowen, the CEO of Neurophos. Welcome, Patrick.
Nice to see you.
Normally I like to get started by giving a lengthy introduction of our guests, but I think that I'd be doing a disservice because you're a Renaissance man of sorts, and so would you mind giving our audience an introduction to your background and what's led you to founding of Neurophos?
Sure. I come from, my degrees are mostly a mix of physics and electrical engineering, and I ended up falling in love with Maxwell's equations and light in general as like a young teenager or older teenager, I guess. And then I went on to focus on metamaterials, which I thought was fascinating at the time. There was all this cool research going out of Duke University on invisibility cloaking and exotic things like negative index of refraction and whatnot. And so I was really focused on, at the time, training as a theorist and becoming an academic. And then later on, when I graduated, I kind of had one foot in academia through my PhD work at Duke University and also at ETH Zurich in Switzerland. And then I also had the other foot in industry because I was consulting for all these companies that were starting to take metamaterials technology very seriously for real world applications. And that was incredibly attractive to me. I had even in undergrad done undergraduate research for a theoretical particle physicist. I actually did some work on like neutrino oscillations and stuff like that at the time, which was great, but I ended up coming away from that experience, which was incredibly challenging, with the feeling that I didn't want to do science necessarily for science's sake anymore. I wanted to do something that people would actually use. And then I also knew that I didn't want to do solely engineering. I didn't just want to squeeze out the next 2% of efficiency out of some technology that someone else had invented 20 or 40 years ago or whatever. And so it's like I neither wanted to do purely engineering, and I also didn't want to do science for science's sake. It was let's do both engineering, but like physically inspired from the fundamental physics, developing new technologies that are really going to go change the world. So that's what drove me.
Awesome. And the world-renowned professor David Smith at Duke had a profound impact on your life. How
Yeah.
has his influence shaped your ambitions, both in academia and in making business decisions?
Fantastically. David Smith is an amazing person. He's got an incredible background. I keep telling him he should tell his story on a podcast sometime. That would be an awesome separate interview. And he actually did a lot to mentor me and encourage me in a really positive direction. And, he also understood that even though he was working on things that no one else had ever done before, no one had made an invisibility cloak before, and he was the first one to ever do it. He knew that those what he was working on at the time was unlikely in its present form to turn into something real and commercial. So he had a really good eye for, being aware of that and that the technology needed to transform. He was also really good at spanning both theory and experiment and thinking from fundamental first principles, and encouraged me to do that a lot in my own research, almost in a sense of, Bell, who had pushed in the 1960s for us to get real about quantum mechanics, and that led to the discoveries of Bell's inequalities, whereas before that, people were kind of off in la la land in quantum theory. David kind of pushed me to be really real about what's going on in the real world and develop rigorous theory behind it. So yeah, I think it had a huge impact on me.
So let's dive into the Neurophos origin story. So, how did you and Andrew Traverso first meet, and what made you two realize you wanted to build a company together?
Yeah, so Andrew and I met at Duke. We were kind of a good pair in the sense that I had mostly trained as a theorist and he trained more as an experimentalist. And so we had some projects, not formally in common, but we would bounce ideas off of each other pretty often while we were at Duke. The lab that he worked for was a neighboring sister lab to the one that I was in at Duke. And one day we had like the classic sketched out the concept of the company in a napkin in the back of a bar on Duke's campus kind of story. We were sitting down and talking about this thing that we had sort of theoretically developed called a symphotic lens or symphotic material, and how that might be used for artificial intelligence. And we started sketching out the fundamental energy efficiency equations for implementing AI algorithms or matrix multiplication in general using an optical processor. And then we kind of came to the classical conclusions that there's an order event scaling advantage. And then we were thinking about, well, how big can we make that advantage in real world terms? And distilling that down, and we were like, wow, this is like at least 100, if not 1,000x performance improvement. If we could build it, we should go do this thing. And so that was pretty much the beginning of the company.
Well, then fast forward, one of the things, so from a bar napkin to a real company, there's a lot of steps. And one of the things that really caught my ear when we first met was when you were able to talk about MetaVC and Gates Frontier as being early investors. Can you tell me about their involvement and the impact they've had on Neurophos so far?
Absolutely. So, I have to give credit, first of all, to Nathan Myhrvold and Gates together for being early believers in metamaterials long before Neurophos was a thing. They were heavily involved in many of the companies that I had also been involved in. They invested heavily in metamaterials technology and some of the fundamental IP that we ended up leveraging later on that was developed at Intellectual Ventures. So, and then, when we decided to start the company, we knew that we could go to that group, which had spun out a venture capital firm called MetaVC to fund our incubation round. And that really gave us the ability to do the initial design, come up with the initial architecture. And later on, I had an opportunity to pitch for Gates, and he got incredibly excited, and that resulted in him leading our seed round. And so, that was the initial investment, allowed us to go and develop our first Metasurface chips at our foundry supplier. And, really what that resulted in was the reinventing of what is the optical transistor. That is what we had to do. And, hats off to Gates Frontier and MetaVC both for making a massive initial bet on me and Andrew.
So let's fast forward. What is Neurophos's mission, and what's the big audacious problem you're trying to solve?
Yeah, the big audacious problem is really that we, as a society, we are trying to, or at least dreaming of, going through a new industrial revolution. It's like the internal combustion engine and the tractor are being reinvented for the first time, and how that revolutionized farming, and the world went from 90% or whatever it is of the world population engaged in agriculture and much of the world starving to death every year to a very small percentage engaged in agriculture. And hunger is no longer a fundamental issue for humanity. It's a similar thing with AI, except applied to intelligence rather than to mechanical strength. However, I would argue that the application companies kind of have designed the tractor, but the internal combustion engine is still stuck in like steam engine days. The fundamental thing that makes it go underneath it is still very far behind from where it needs to be in order to really revolutionize farming, or in this case, intelligence. And so what Neurophos and the proof for that, by the way, is that human intelligence, the human brain, is about 10,000 times more energy efficient than modern day CMOS. So modern chips are way beyond the ball for where it needs to be. And if you listen to the major developers of AI, they will tell you that we need to improve this thing by at least a factor of 100. And we can deal with them being 100 times less efficient than human beings, but not 10,000 times less efficient. And so Neurophos's goal has been all along to develop a new compute platform, not just for AI, but for general purpose compute, actually, that is 100 times faster and 100 times more energy efficient than modern day CMOS.
Okay, so I've been saying for a while you can't consume data without consuming power. And you talked about the Industrial Revolution and really solving the problem of starvation. One of the concerns for a lot of people is the planetary impact that this AI, this power consumption is going to have on us as a society. If you're successful, and I believe you will be, what impact will Neurophos's technology have on society as a whole?
We are genuinely talking about 100x higher energy efficiency. So there's two pieces of this. There's both energy efficiency and speed. And without that improvement in fundamental energy efficiency, we're just going to have 100 times more power plants of whatever sort we end up having to develop, whether those are nuclear or solar or wind turbines or oil and gas, whatever it is. And all of them have their disadvantages. Like people don't necessarily like wind turbines much more than we like nuclear or anything else. They all have disadvantages and advantages. And whichever platform we end up choosing, you're going to have 100 times more of them to deliver the same intelligence for humanity. And so, that is the impact that Neurophos is going to change. So that's one of them. The second one is the cost of intelligence is going to become 100 times cheaper. So right now, the raw cost of intelligence, if we keep going down this road, is actually it's enabling for some applications, but it's actually kind of prohibitive for other applications. Strawberry, developed by OpenAI, is a pretty clear example that it actually takes quite some time and is quite expensive to get it to do simple things, even like solve real world problems, when what you're trying to do is get it to do something beyond just language translation and understanding in a simple chatbot. But instead, if you want it to actually solve a word problem, it's a lot more compute intensive. And so that's going to be severely limiting if what we want to do is have these things solve real problems for us with actual rationality behind them.
Well, and by lowering that cost too, another thing that's been near and dear to my heart for the last couple of years is the democratization of AI.
Yeah.
So by democratizing AI, what other impacts do you think that the company can have?
Yeah, so right now this is basically a monopoly by NVIDIA at this point, and they're deeply entrenched. And even if the number two person like AMD is successful in taking a significant portion of their market share, if you want to go as a startup and work on a new AI application, you're not really able to do that without going out and buying 100,000 GPUs, and that's like a $3 billion investment at this point. You can't compete with the big guys without finding a VC that's going to invest $3 billion. And by the way, if they do that, then that's going to go into CapEx, not OpEx. It's not going into developing new fundamental IP for your startup. It's just, the VC may as well have invested in some other sort of commodity at that point. They're not interested in investing in data centers. They're interested in investing in new technology. And so that 3 million would not go to the new technology. So if we can reduce that by 100x, this becomes within striking distance of venture capital and startups to actually go out and buy their own compute, to do their own training and inference and compete with the big boys, because otherwise it's just going to be left up to the Magnificent Seven tech companies to develop AI.
I love it. And I actually want to kind of double click on that and pull on that thread a little bit, because you're one of the most thoughtful leaders that I've ever encountered as far as what you look for in investment and investors. You're not just looking to take money from anybody. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're looking to develop a long-term relationship with someone, and you should think carefully about who it is you're developing a long-term relationship with as a capital partner. You want someone who's going to actually be there in the trenches with you. I mean, it's more than just for the minimum bar is like you need someone who's empathetic and understands what it's like to be an operator and the challenge that you're going to go through. But you also want someone who's willing to be in the trenches with you. Also, someone who has seen a lot of stuff before that you have not seen. And that's definitely the case for me. So, like, I came from an academic background and then decided to become an entrepreneur. It's not like I have experiences of 20 companies like some venture capitalists have. And so I really value that experience. And at the same time, you want them to have had a background of supporting their founders, understanding the decisions and the struggles that you typically have to go through. So
Awesome. Well, and founders are faced with a lot of challenges, and there can be some real hard lessons learned along the way. What was one of the biggest mistakes you made early on, and what have you learned as a result of that?
I actually had came at this from such it's really funny, a nerd perspective, I guess I would call it at the beginning, where I believed that it's a very classic founder mistake. Like I believed that everything that mattered was just the technology and what I could deliver as a theorist and an inventor, and somehow that would be the fundamental thing that makes the company go. And like there's a sense in which it's true. Like you have to have a core invention, a core value proposition, a core technology. But if that's all you've got, you're not going to go anywhere. And I really undervalued when we started the company, the team and relationships with customers. And that has completely changed. I mean, I learned that lesson pretty quick, maybe after the first year or so, that everything is really the team and the customers. You don't really get to, I remember one of my advisors telling me, you don't really get to build the product as the entrepreneur. And that's what you think about all the time when you first do this for the first time. The best that you get to do is build the company that builds the product. And that really rephrased or changed my entire perspective about this. So I am all about getting the best people that I can to come into this company to build the best company that I can that will be the necessary vehicle to build this fantastic product.
Well, and let's talk about that team because you've hit some home runs and you've been able to attract some of the best technical and operational leaders in the entire industry. How have you gone about doing that? That shift in mindset is probably part of it, but what else? What have you done to intentionally be able to gravitationally pull those people?
That's a great question. I think the biggest thing is definitely the technology. So a lot of the people who work here, they're attracted to like this extraordinary play in the industry, and they really believe in what we're building. That's probably the number one thing. I think the number two thing, and this is going to sound like it's tooting my own horn, but it's not. I'm actually talking about the entire team. Smart people like to work with smart people. So if you start off with a fantastic team and then the new candidates come in and they get to know the people that you've got here and they're like, wow, I really want to work with these awesome people. This is going to be a lot of fun. And also, so nurturing your early team is really important. And then also nurturing the culture. I think we have a lot of fun together at Neurophos. Like we generally get along really, really well. We hang out a lot outside the office. People are generally very friendly and happy and excited who are working here. So we kind of love the culture that we've developed. And then finally, this is kind of controversial, but I did start off the company with the policy that we would all, as best as we could, work together and in person. And it's been really interesting to see how that has played out. I've actually seen it be much more attractive to some of the more talented people because they know that these people are serious. They want to get moving. They want to do something real in the world, and they're willing to like dedicate their weekdays 9 to 5, all working together. Some of the most talented people that I've met that have decided to join the team or are planning to join the team have been really attracted by that. So,
If there were one or two items that you would point to in Neurophos's culture that you're most proud of so far as CEO, that would maybe surprise someone outside the company to learn, you might have named one there. Are there any others?
yeah, I think we've developed a culture where we tend to approach things from first principles, take into consideration all the ideas that are on the table, and then distill down to, from there, rigorously solid engineering decisions. And I think that's great because, I think it's too easy for people to, with their egos, be dismissive of new ideas or something like that. And I've really tried to discourage that, encourage as many new ideas coming into a proposed engineering decision as possible, but then make the final decision on real analysis and real data. And I think that's been wonderful, actually, and has guided us into staying with a long-term vision that actually has legs.
So I had mentioned a while ago that I thought photonics was going to be that next wave over the next couple of years, and it seems to come to fruition. It seems like every other week that there's a new massive funding round for photonics companies, which is great, except for the battle for photonics talent is only going to increase because those companies need to build with people. And it's an industry that I've experienced a lot of people went away from for a long period of time. And now it's becoming the new hot thing again. And you can't educate people quickly enough to be able to absorb that kind of talent. So, long way of asking, what strategies do you plan to use to leverage to remain competitive in one of the most, if not the most, hotly contested environments for the best talent?
Absolutely. So I think the number one thing comes back to actually the product and what we're building. I think a lot of people don't realize that we are actually, to the best of my knowledge, the only people still doing core optical compute. I'm aware of some companies that are doing some very specialized forms of compute for FHE and things like that. But all of the other companies in the space are working on interconnects, which is fantastic, but is in my view, much more limited application and much more limited market than compute. We have the biggest opportunity in front of us at Neurophos out of any of the other optical companies in the space by far. This is a massive, massive market. NVIDIA's worth 3.5 trillion, and arguably the majority of their market cap is due to one product, the H100, and we are going directly after that one product. And so I think it's the journey and the excitement of the journey that warrants having fantastic people jump on board that journey with you. So that's the number one thing. Is like I want to make sure other people understand the impact of what we're doing. We're reinventing fundamental compute. And then secondly, people need to understand, join early before this thing takes off. As soon as we start raising our next rounds and moving on, it's going to be much more difficult to get the larger equity grants that you can only get in an earlier stage company. And things have, without a doubt, been moving.
Awesome. Now, let's assume that you're talking with an engineer, a developer, a leader who didn't need a job, but was curious about what Neurophos is doing. What would you say to convince them that Neurophos is worth taking a bet on?
Well, there's the massive application that we're talking about from a market standpoint, but that means nothing if you don't believe that this is the right approach to take it to solve that problem, or if you don't believe that this is the right team to solve that problem. So what I would encourage that person to do is to come in and take a closer look. Come talk to me, do a deep tech dive with me, come get to know the team and see that this is the right team to go tackle this problem. I'm happy to do that for any really talented individuals who want to come join us in this journey.
Another thing came to mind is as important as bringing the right people in, it's keeping the wrong people out. What are the types of people, or who would you advise not to apply?
So I would advise, from a personality standpoint, what I try to avoid in this company is people who, in their mode of, let's say, argumentation, that they tend to steamroll or belittle other people. Like that often happens. Engineers, we've got egos. I think you don't get this far as a technologist without all of us kind of having something of a healthy ego. But you do have to be really careful how that plays into how you treat other people. And I'm very careful in the culture at Neurophos that we are treating each other very well with respect. So that's probably the number one thing. And then secondly, I would say that at Neurophos, just having a PhD is not enough. We're not hiring people that just, kind of walked the normal walk through academia or whatever. Like for the people that are in this company, it's either 20 plus years of CMOS experience for a lot of positions, although we do hire fresh outs. But I guess regardless of the journey that you've gone on, we are looking for people whose accomplishments outshine the simple steps that they took on that journey. So not just a PhD, but actually, demonstrated inventing something that is actually being commercially adopted somewhere, or in those 20 years of industry experience, like actually delivering product or actually delivering fantastic inventions. Or if you're fresh out, show me the undergraduate research that you did. That's what I'm going to be really interested in. Show me, the awesome projects that you've done. Like those are way more important to me, and I think to Neurophos as a team, than just having an undergrad from MIT, for example, if you're a fresh out.
If there was somebody that was interested in a partnership in investing in Neurophos or even possibly joining, how would you advise them to get a hold of you, Patrick?
You can email me directly at ptbowen@neurophos.com. Happy to answer that. Or you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear from you.
Well, our audience is in for a treat when they get a chance to hear this, and we are so grateful for the time that you've taken and wish you all the best and much success on the journey.
Awesome. Thanks so much.